You might have heard about this guy, Michael Saylor, the CEO of Microstrategy, who has this Bitcoin strategy. And this is a pretty wacky thing. You might have seen this guy in the news a couple of times. This can't possibly be working, right? Wrong. You guys wouldn't believe the data, the analytics, and the charts about the success of this already. So the question that I got to pose to you, if you're a business owner, an entrepreneur, or you're the head of a household that has some money, and you're trying to think of how you can protect your assets and how you can leverage something like a Bitcoin strategy to unlock even further value, to have more freedom, more security now and into the future, we're going to dive in because what Michael Saylor has pulled off so far is nothing short of perhaps the most interesting thing that has ever happened in all of corporate finance. I don't want to make this video about myself. I want this to solely be focused on MicroStrategy and Bitcoin and what Michael Saylor is doing over there. However, if I come across like a Bitcoin tourist or someone with some sort of like sleazy sales angle, then it will not have the intended effect that way I want this video to have. So just really quick, my name is Jeff Sokol. I work for GT Investment Management. I serve as a private wealth advisor. We do a lot of stuff in tail risk hedging and sovereign risk management. I think it's going to go without saying Bitcoin is obviously an important part of our strategy. My firm is biased toward alternative investments. We work in business development and private equity. I worked in international business development. I was in Asia, Central and South America for a long stint in my 20s. Um, so just to get that out of the way, we do business planning. We have consulted a number of business owners about what it would look like if they were to adopt a Bitcoin strategy. Um, I just got to the point after looking at Michael Saylor's earnings call last week where I was like, man, like the meme of like, why aren't more people talking about this? I had that moment where I was like, man, I'm gonna just make a video, aggregate some resources from some really smart people online, just put this out there on YouTube and see what people think, and hopefully, drive some momentum. Not to get any business for myself, but purely because this is such an interesting thing. So I hope you guys do enjoy. Let's dive in. Exhibit A, the annualized asset performance chart over 4 years. You can see leading the way is MicroStrategy. How could MicroStrategy be outpacing Bitcoin by a multiple of 2? We're going to get into it. Reminds me of this book I read, Beating the Odds, From Las Vegas to Wall Street. Wait a minute, there's nothing about Bitcoin in here. Trash. So how does he do it? From last week's earnings call, here are the 9 Bitcoin principles. Buy and hold Bitcoin indefinitely, exclusively, securely. So he's certainly not holding it on Coinbase. He's finding a way to digitally custody it, perhaps even offline. Prioritizing MicroStrategy common stock, long-term value creation. So he issues equity to buy more Bitcoin. Treat all investors with respect, consistency, and transparency. Got to do that. That's just fundamental business practice. Structure MicroStrategy to outperform Bitcoin via intelligent leverage. We just saw that. Over the past 4 years, MicroStrategy has an annualized return rate that doubles that of Bitcoin. Achieving Bitcoin continually while achieving positive Bitcoin yield. Grow rapidly and responsibly, subject to market dynamics. So, he's not asleep at the wheel. Issue innovative and fixed income securities backed by Bitcoin. We're going to get into this in a moment about the volatility that comes with it that would allow MicroStrategy become something of a fixed income instrument. I know this is all this technical jargon, but we're going to show you how it works. Maintain a healthy, robust, pristine balance sheet, so not taking on bad debt, not getting too far ahead of their skis, and promoting global adoption of Bitcoin as a treasury reserve asset. So hey, the more the merrier. He's creating this robust ecosystem. If it works for MicroStrategy, maybe some other companies are going to become interested, and we're going to get into that too. But this is this important thing about using MicroStrategy's common stock, this at the market issue of equity, or you can see the convertible bonds that they issued as well. That look at those, these 2025 convertible bonds, they're up 224%. My goodness, everything this guy issues outpaces the growth of Bitcoin. And here's Michael Saylor here with the orange tie. I couldn't find anything orange, but my shirt has some orange on it. It just got me thinking about some things that I learned when I read The Personal MBA, Mastering the Art of Business. So much here that is exactly like Michael Saylor is doing. Oh, wait a minute. There's nothing about that in here. Trash. Have to be careful with this slide. One, because for some reason it came out blurry, but two, uh, it can get over everybody's head if we get too technical. I just want to think about it this way. There's Bitcoin, a $1.4 trillion asset class, and the traditional look is this guy Saylor has a Bitcoin strategy. The important point is that it's so much more than that. By anchoring his reserve to Bitcoin, it allows for all of this extra activity. There's the options volume on MicroStrategy, the security or the common stock of the company. There are these other leveraged products that are anchored to the underlying security of MicroStrategy. There's MicroStrategy equity in of itself. There's the spot Bitcoin ETFs. There are the convertible notes and bonds and offerings that Saylor is issuing. There is a dividend and a MicroStrategy fixed income alternative, the asterisk here because they're not available yet, but in the future they're going to be. What all of this does is it's leveraging this Bitcoin strategy to MicroStrategy to create more shareholder value. That's the long and short of it. There's a lot of math, there's a lot of technical information, but the important thing if you're a business owner and you're thinking about having Bitcoin in the treasury, here is a robust offering of what you can do. Simply acquire Bitcoin, issue securities. If your math is done properly, you can use the high volatility and the high leverage to create additional shareholder value. That's what Michael Saylor does. And let me move myself out of the way so we can see the man. That's what he does using this macro economy with Bitcoin as his strategic play to create more Bitcoin per share. And as we've seen, adding more Bitcoin per share has this effect of increasing the share value of MicroStrategy, which is obviously making shareholders of MicroStrategy happy. And if these shareholders of MicroStrategy start getting these dividends and this becomes a fixed income alternative while the share price is increasing, they're going to be euphoric. And then what's going to happen is, what about Microsoft or Apple, these other Magnificent Seven companies? Shareholders are going to think, well, we could be doing this too. Why aren't we doing this? If Saylor can pull it off, and then you just have this feedback loop where everything Saylor says comes true. The net asset value of MicroStrategy keeps increasing. He keeps buying more Bitcoin. Other companies start getting involved. And it just reminds me of the only investment guide you'll ever need. I learned exactly about this Bitcoin strategy. I'm so glad I read this. Not trash. Volatility has been mentioned a few times now. Let's look at the statistics. 102% volatility. This is the implied volatility for at-the-money options contract with a 30-day expiration. Like I said, technical jargon, feel free to ignore it. The point is, almost twice as volatile as Nvidia and Tesla, more than double the volatility of Meta, almost triple Amazon, Google, more than triple Microsoft and Apple, 4 times the volatility of Netflix. The important thing about that level of implied volatility is to sell these at-the-money options contracts is going to get you a higher premium, meaning that is how you unlock this type of fixed income alternative, where you can hold MicroStrategy shares, you can sell options, calls, and puts on top of it to generate yourself income while participating in the upside of the stock without having to deal with all the complications of being in Bitcoin directly. That is a huge, huge benefit. The traded daily volume, look at this. For a company that's not nearly the same size as the Magnificent Seven, that is quite an impressive amount of volume, even more than double the amount of Google. That is crazy. So what Saylor is doing is he's not just buying Bitcoin. He's not just selling equity, raising capital to buy Bitcoin. It's so much more than that. He is leveraging the Bitcoin price by leveraging everything else that's going on in the market. It's this 4D chess he's doing that reminds me of concepts and strategies for protecting your wealth in asset protection. Okay, I think the joke is getting played out here, but the stats on this speak for themselves. The strategy is working, and If you'd like a consultation on how it could work for your family or for your business, we would be happy to have that conversation. You might be thinking to yourself, why didn't anybody bring this idea to me? Why only Michael Saylor had this idea? What was the mainstream media suggesting to do as recently as when Bitcoin was near $16,000 per coin?
I think that everybody who owns these various coins, Solana, Litecoin, I do think you're an idiot. Okay? I did not go to college to get stupid. These people who own these things should not own them.
Hey, thanks, Jim Cramer. Has the mainstream media shifted? Is the sentiment starting to move in the right direction? I'm glad you asked.
Another name in the space to watch is Microstrategy, surging in the month, up around 45% in October. The company also announcing it plans to raise $42 billion over the next 3 years to buy even more Bitcoin. That is basically the public equity play on Bitcoin maximalism. And has
all of the reasons we have looked at, it seems inevitable that other companies are going to start taking a look and considering if this is a strategy they should adopt. There you have it, the Chief Technical Officer, a Mr. Kevin Scott from Microsoft. A quote, "I don't know why I hadn't thought of it before, but Bitcoin is an incredibly powerful concept, and I don't think we've fully grasped what it could mean for society." Interesting. That looks a lot like Microsoft shareholders starting to get a look at MicroStrategy and saying, let's move, and the Microsoft board being slow to act. But hey, better late than never. Meanwhile, it isn't only corporate finance. There can be pensions, endowments, funds, sovereign wealth funds, you name it. Here's one, a university's endowment. Emory University reported owning more than $15 million of grayscale Bitcoin mini trust. Interesting. So they own it by way of shares. And you can think, well, let's verify that. Okay, sure. Here is their 13F. There you have it. Grayscale Bitcoin Trust for a university's endowment fund. So it's happening. It is all happening. What's going to happen next? Here is a Mr. Joe Carlasari, a great follow over on Twitter or X. He is a lawyer. He works in the, he's a securities lawyer, I believe. I'm not all the way sure what his specific role is, but he is an advocate for Bitcoin. He's bullish on Bitcoin, and he does a lot of work in the digital asset space. Anyways, here's a suggestion. Are you an Apple shareholder and have been for 3 years? If so, you follow the strict notice requirements under Apple's bylaws. You can submit a non-binding advisory question about buying Bitcoin for consideration at their annual meeting. So here you go. Power to the people. As a shareholder, you can suggest it. And it might start getting some momentum because there's real proof of concept by way of what MicroStrategy is doing. And now Microsoft is taking a look as well. So we've talked about Apple. We've talked about Microsoft. Another interesting thing to consider is that, guess what? These guys make a lot of money. So whereas MicroStrategy is issuing equity to get more Bitcoin, these guys, they produce revenue. They've got free cash flow. I'm not saying that MicroStrategy does not. I just mean by an order of magnitude larger, the ability for the Mag 7 stocks, just by way of the profit margins, the free cash that they have on hand, they could be buying a ton of Bitcoin without even having to issue any bonds or any new shelf offerings of shares. Starting with Berkshire Hathaway. Everyone knows Warren Buffett's company. He's sitting on about $300 billion worth of cash. I don't know if the Oracle of Omaha is going to use that as, he's getting a little bit older and he's a legend. I don't know if this is the move he wants to make at this late stage of his career. But Google sitting on more than $100 billion. Amazon close to $90 billion. Microsoft around $75 billion. Apple something like $62 billion. Meta something like $58 billion. Nvidia something like $35 billion. Tesla something like $34 billion. I don't know if that's been updated since their most recent earnings, by the way. That was those figures are from a couple of weeks ago. But these guys got a ton of money is the point that I'm trying to make here. So if they decide to start doing it, and this is just a Mag 7, what about pension funds? What about sovereign wealth funds? There is a lot of money out there that is going to be looking for a home, And if even some of it starts to flow into Bitcoin, Saylor is going to start looking like more and more of a genius. He might become the richest man in the world at some point, and I'm sure people are going to be paying attention once that happens. And then the snowball effect, baby. We'll have an avalanche with upside momentum for Bitcoin. You're going to want to be in a place that has leveraged upside. So far, that looks like MicroStrategy. Let's see if anybody else can replicate that model. I want to make sure these guys get credit for their work. We're over in a Twitter group called Irresponsibly Long MicroStrategy. And here's Adrian Morris. Here is what he has to say about this concept of their net asset value trading at a multiple. Generally, you would say a premium or a discount to net asset value using 1 as your anchor. But MicroStrategy trades above that net asset value by quite a large margin. So here are some charts here for you guys to look at. If they make sense to you, great. It'd be challenging to explain it in great detail. So I'm just going to show you these. Again, this is Adrian Morris. While I do some reading here here are some notes I have as to why I think it is the case that they trade at a premium to their net asset value and that it will be sustainable. Firstly, MicroStrategy effectively provides indirect Bitcoin exposure, leveraging Bitcoin's upside with the additional option of trading it on traditional equity markets. The company's decision to consistently buy more Bitcoin amplifies its correlation with Bitcoin's price movement, making it a Bitcoin proxy of sorts for investors who may be more comfortable trading stocks than crypto. This is the net asset value expansion here, by the way. Give you another second to look at that. The net asset value premium and volatility. Since MicroStrategy stock trades at a premium to its net asset value, it carries higher volatility relative to Bitcoin itself, especially given the high leverage they've employed in purchasing Bitcoin. This amplified exposure could mean significant upside if Bitcoin appreciates substantially, but also heightened downside risks if Bitcoin experiences a significant drawdown. So that's something we haven't spoken about, but the downside is obviously there. The operational and structural risk. MicroStrategy's core business remains in enterprise analytics software, although it's increasingly overshadowed by the Bitcoin holdings. While the company has become almost synonymous with its Bitcoin strategy, this focus introduces risks. Operational risks and any adverse changes in crypto regulation, governance, or taxation on the Bitcoin holdings could directly impact its value. So that is something that is worth considering. And the balance sheet leverage. The use of debt to fund Bitcoin purchases increases the risk profile. As long as Bitcoin's value appreciates, this strategy works well. However, in bear markets, high leverage could strain the company's balance sheet. The investment thesis becomes more speculative, with MicroStrategy serving as both a Bitcoin proxy and a high beta play on Bitcoin's performance. So that is certainly important to keep in mind. Now, another gentleman I'd like for his work to be appreciated. Climb that ladder, again in the Irresponsibly Long MicroStrategy group. End up much more than 2% of all the Bitcoin. So they have 252,000 currently, 1.2% of the 21 million that will ever exist. Okay. First, on their premium to net asset value, what he has to say. They are around 8%, and the year isn't over. This is on the Bitcoin yield, so the amount of Bitcoin they have per share. They have two main weapons to get to where they want to be to provide that level of yield. They can dilute shares at the market and purchase Bitcoin, or they can issue low interest rate bonds, which are redeemable for shares at a 30 or 40% increase in stock price. So they have some tools to get there. Both of these methods provide yield for shareholders. The effect becomes easier as the net asset value premium increases. Okay. If they get to 5, so we know we're somewhere between like 2 and 3 or as high as 4, depending how you were to calculate it. But if they were to get to 5, then they have more flexibility. And maybe they get there if Bitcoin starts to go up, or, it depends how we would get there. But 5% share dilution would allow for a 25% increase in Bitcoin holdings, resulting in about a 19% Bitcoin per share increase. Okay, so if their share price appreciates, it gives them more flexibility to acquire more Bitcoin per share. And I'm not going to keep reading this. There's it's a long, detailed thread, but okay, so this is the point I wanted to get to. If if they can keep diluting shares by about 5%, this is the point that he ultimately makes, and they're able to increase their Bitcoin holdings by 25% per year, here's what that looks like. Oh, baby. By 2034, they will have over 10% of all the Bitcoin that will ever exist. My goodness, just absolutely breathtaking to think about. So, before we get bogged down too much in the future of Bitcoin and MicroStrategy, I still want to pose the question to the audience, especially any business owners or entrepreneurs or wealthy heads of households out there. Are you bullish enough? Can you carve out a sleeve to do some fiat arbitrage to have some Bitcoin in your treasury? That is the question. And I hope that we're getting closer to you having an answer. And really, I just want people to be more open-minded that it's something that they should be considering. Dylan LeClaire, one of the legends in the Bitcoin space, he's got his little orange coin there next to the name. MicroStrategy announced the intention to raise 21 billion of equity and 21 billion of convertible debt. I think we've probably already mentioned this throughout this video, but $42 billion is ready at the market issue to buy more Bitcoin. It was mentioned on the earnings call. We did just look at increasing Bitcoin per share year over year. So I think we already answered the question. Is Michael Saylor going to buy more Bitcoin? Of course he is. But in case we hadn't shown this already, he's got $42 billion as an ace up the sleeve. And where does he clock in? So the top 10 list, we know Satoshi Nakamoto at 1.1 million coins. The anonymous figure who invented Bitcoin after the global financial crisis of 0809. There's Binance, who's still up there, BlackRock with their ETF, Grayscale, one of the original quote-unquote ETFs, whatever you want to call it. The US government is up there. But yeah, I mean, he's got some ground to make up, and he does have some competition coming from BlackRock and Binance. Binance still up there, but Saylor certainly intends to keep buying, which means there is going to be a bid on Bitcoin, which means, in general, you got to think upward price pressure is, if not inevitable, then, I mean, we know there's going to be buyers, so there's going to have to be a lot more sellers to push the price down. And we know MicroStrategy is going to keep buying. Forecast on markets. I know we would like to think that Bitcoin is non-correlated, but in general, if markets are going higher, then we expect Bitcoin to generally go along with it. So from Ryan Dietrich of Carson Research or Carson Group, another great follow over on X. Okay, so the best 6 months of the year are here. From November to April, 77% of the time we go higher with an average increase of 7.1%. So if markets are bullish, it might be fair to expect Bitcoin to also be bullish. From the great Wayne Whaley, another great follow over on Twitter. What happens when you've gone up for 5 months in a row and then you go down? So we were down about 1% in October. What happens? Well, the next 6 months, this goes back to data from 1950 through 2023. The next 6 months, 31 times it's happened that we broke a 5-month win streak. We go higher 28 times out of 31 with an average rate of change of 9% over the next 6 months. All right. And from FX Evolution, our friends over in Australia, this was about a week ago. Digital asset inflows hit 901 million last week. Year-to-date inflows to a staggering $27 billion, 3 times the 2021 record. So we don't know necessarily who this is. The source is CoinShares, by the way, by way of FX Evolution. But some institutional money is clearly bidding for digital assets. And markets look poised to do well as long as we can get over the speed bump with more earnings and hopefully no political turmoil. Then markets are poised to go higher, and we think Bitcoin is going to go higher with it. Last thing here, looking at some charts, and again, I want the authors to get credit for their work. This is, I don't know how to say the last name, Wujastic. Jake Wujastic, great follow over on Twitter or X. The halving chart, what happens you have a halving? There's about a lull period before we go a lot higher. So the second halving, 3 months of chop, we eventually go higher. The third halving, 4 months of chop, then we start to go higher. We had the fourth halving in April 19th, 2024. We've gone sideways for about 6 months. We are setting up for an explosive move. The more the chop, the bigger the pop. From Kush, another tough last name, Alemzadeh, I'm going to say. So similar. You go sideways for a while, then you go a lot higher. 11x back before 2018, 5x in the lead up to 2020. How much higher are we going to go this time? 2x would give us about 140. 3x would give us about 210. So let's see. The long investor, he's a little bit more measured. He uses a lot of the Elliott wave followed by ABC corrections. He uses Fibonacci's to get his levels. He thinks if we hold here above this like 71, 72 area, then we're going to go, he's got about like 84 to 92, followed by something like 100. So he's got a fairly measured approach here, but as long as we're holding this breakout, he thinks we can get decently higher. And then looking at a Bitcoin geometric mean, so we can use like a combination of math or a logarithmic chart to figure out where we can go by laying fractals on top of the price action. This has us going as high as, where is that, 350, 371, sometime in October of 2025. Hey, I wouldn't be complaining if that were the outcome. I should say there are some bears out there, and it may depend if it's Trump or if it's Kamala Harris. I don't know, but sentiment out there sure is very bullish going into this election season. Oh, baby. Buckle up, Cowboys.